10,000 years before the first temple, 5,000 years before the wheel, there were footprints. Human footprints etched into the alkaline sands of White Sands, New Mexico. But here's the problem. They're over 21,000 years old. That's 7,000 years older than anyone said humans were in the Americas. And if that's true, then everything we thought we knew is wrong. Forget what you learned in school. The tidy story of humans trickling in from Siberia across a frozen land bridge? Too simple. Too late. Because new evidence is revealing something far stranger and far older. Did the first Native Americans arrive by land? Or did they sail in from the edge of the world? What if the bloodlines of the first Americans come not just from Asia, but from ancient France, from lost Polynesian navigators? What if the Americas were not the New World, but one of humanity's oldest? Subscribe to Mystafeed. For nearly a century, this story was settled. Clovis first, a clean, elegant theory. Around 13,000 years ago, a wave of humans crossed the Bering land bridge from Siberia, funneled south through an ice-free corridor in Canada, and scattered like seeds into the empty soil of the Americas. Their signature? Fluted stone points, Clovis points, razor-edged artifacts found from Alaska to Mexico. It was tidy. It was teachable. It was wrong. Because nature doesn't obey clean narratives. In 1997, beneath a bluff in Monte Verde, Chile, a sight emerged from the bog that shattered everything. Fire pits, bones, tools, dated to 14,500 years ago, more than 1,000 years before the Clovis culture ever appeared, thousands of miles south of the ice corridor. Then came the butchering marks on mammoth bones in Florida, DNA in ancient coprolites, yes, fossilized human feces in Oregon caves, and finally, those ghostly footprints in New Mexico. Human tracks preserved in gypsum silt, walking along the shore of an Ice Age lake. 21,000 years ago. It was like finding Neanderthal graffiti in a high school locker. These were not anomalies. They were signals. And together, they told a different story, one not of sudden arrival, but of deep time. Of a human presence in the Americas during the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets covered continents and oceans swallowed coasts. Which means this: the first Americans didn't follow a path of least resistance. They walked into a world trying to kill them. And they didn't just survive. They thrived. There was a time 22,000 years ago when Alaska and Siberia were the same place. A continent not found on any modern map, Beringia. An icy grassland 1,000 miles wide, binding Asia to the Americas in a frozen handshake. Herds of mammoths thundered across it. Lions and wolves stalked the snowfields. And somewhere in that white silence, humans waited, not marching, not invading, waiting, because the ice didn't part right away. For nearly 5,000 years, early hunter-gatherers were trapped in Beringia, isolated by glacial walls and frozen seas. This wasn't a bridge. It was a prison. But it may also have been a crucible. Genetic evidence tells us that the ancestors of Native Americans diverged from East Asian populations over 23,000 years ago before the supposed migration south. For millennia, they lived in isolation, adapting to cold, mastering survival in a twilight world of permafrost and wind. When the ice finally retreated, they moved south, not all at once, but in pulses. Archaeologists now believe there wasn't just one wave of migration, there were at least three. Some groups followed the coast, hugging the kelp forests that stretched from Kamchatka to California. Others moved inland, into the guts of a continent that had never known a human footstep. But here's the twist. No matter how many waves, all these people share one genetic signature, a common ancestor from Beringia. That's what makes the next part so strange. Because in the DNA of some ancient South Americans, we find something else. Something that doesn't belong. It sounds like pseudoscience. Like something scraped from the edge of an ancient aliens documentary. But the idea refuses to die. The Solutrean hypothesis claims that the first Americans didn't come just from the West, but from the East, from Europe. Specifically, from the Solutrean culture of prehistoric France and Spain Ice Age hunters who lived nearly 20,000 years ago. They carved stone into deadly elegance, thin, leaf-shaped blades unlike anything else on Earth, except Clovis. In the early 2000s, archaeologists noted strange similarities between Solutrean tools and Clovis points, the iconic weapons of early America, not just in shape, but in technique. A rare, high-skill method called overshot flaking. Too specific to be coincidence, they said. And the Solutreans had a motive, the ice. During the last glacial maximum, the Atlantic was narrower, lower, and full of sea ice. In theory, Solutrean hunters could have island hopped along the frozen fringe, following seals and seabirds from Europe to the American coast thousands of years before the Beringians moved south. Evidence? A few scattered blades beneath the Clovis layer. A genetic whisper in the mitochondrial DNA of some early North Americans. Even a butchered mastodon in Florida dated to 14,500 years ago, where no Siberian migrants should have been. But there are problems. No Solutrean boats have ever been found. No unbroken trail of tools across the North Atlantic. And the genetic link? Thin, controversial, and increasingly challenged. Still, the idea lingers. Because the Atlantic hides its secrets well. And every year, the sea gives up another bone, another tool, another reason to doubt the neatness of history. What if the first Americans weren't just one people, but many? What if the continent wasn't discovered once, but again and again? And what if some of those first footprints were European? The Pacific is a myth-eater. Vast, merciless, and riddled with memory, it swallowed entire civilizations, and perhaps, once, it carried them. Because something doesn't add up on the coasts of South America. In the highlands of Chile and Peru, archaeologists have uncovered a strange genetic signal. It flickers faintly in the DNA of ancient remains, not Asian, not Siberian, something oceanic. Even stranger are the chickens. In southern Chile, researchers discovered chicken bones dated to before Columbus, before European ships ever touched the Americas. These weren't American chickens. They bore genetic markers from Polynesian breeds raised thousands of miles away on Pacific islands. The implications? Explosive. If Polynesians reached South America before Europeans, then they weren't just island hoppers. They were continent finders, navigators who crossed open ocean with nothing but star maps and memory. Some linguists point to similarities between Polynesian and Mapuche words. Others note sweet potatoes native to South America found in prehistoric Polynesian gardens. Too much coincidence, too little clarity. Did Polynesians settle parts of the Americas, or just trade with its coastal people? Was there a lost voyage, a colony erased by time? The evidence remains fragmentary. But even fragments whisper, the Pacific was never a barrier. It was a highway. And someone, long before Magellan, knew how to use it. Bone never lies. It weathers. It breaks. But buried deep within its marrow is the truth written in molecules. And now, at last, we can read it. Over the last decade, ancient DNA has torn open the silence of prehistory. From frozen Siberian infants to skulls in Andean caves, genomes are revealing what artifacts alone could not, who the first Americans really were. Here's what we know. All Native American populations, North, Central, and South, descend primarily from a single ancestral group that split off from East Asians over 23,000 years ago. These people lingered in Beringia for millennia, and then exploded across 2 continents. But they weren't alone. In Brazil, scientists uncovered the remains of a 10,000-year-old woman. Her skull bore striking similarities not to Siberians, but to Australo-Melanesians, a genetic echo not from Asia, but from the deep Pacific. She belongs to a population called Population GA, a ghost lineage that suggests the unthinkable, that there were 2 founding groups in the Americas, one from the north, via Beringia, and another from somewhere else. A forgotten people, lost to extinction, who left behind only bones and bloodlines. It doesn't end there. In Greenland, DNA from an ancient child revealed yet another migration, this one separate from the first Americans and their descendants. These Arctic people, ancestors of the Inuit, came thousands of years later from a different wave of Siberian origin. So what does this all mean? That the peopling of the Americas wasn't a single event. It was a collision. A convergence of journeys, some across land, others by sea, and perhaps a few that defy what we thought humans were capable of. The answers are still coming. Carved from bones, lifted from soil, whispered in genomes. But this much is clear. The first Americans were not a single tribe, or story, or origin. They were waves in a storm, some from the snow-choked east, some from the windswept west, and maybe even some from the endless Pacific beyond. They crossed oceans of ice, continents of fear, and left behind only shadows, footprints in gypsum, blades in stone, echoes in our blood. And we are still listening. Because every shovel of earth, every test of ancient DNA brings us closer to a truth far grander than myth, that the story of humanity isn't one of conquest, but of endurance, of fire against frost, of curiosity over comfort, of souls who saw the edge of the world and kept walking. The Americas were never empty. They were ancient, and those who came first came long before we imagined. Thanks for watching. If you felt the wonder in this journey, if the ancient world stirred something in you, subscribe for more stories that peel back the layers of time. Here, we walk with ghosts, and sometimes they whisper back.